our symposium today. We're so glad to see your faces this morning. If you haven't found the coffee yet, it's right over here in the back of the room, so please help yourself to coffee and water throughout the day. And it is now my privilege to introduce to you Joanne O'Neill, who is currently serving on the Colorado Human Trafficking Council as the second of 5 representatives on a citywide human trafficking task force coalition. Joanne has her master's degree in counseling from Colorado Christian University and is retired from the United States Air Force. And she currently has advocated for adolescents in a variety of capacities since 1999. So we're really privileged to hear from her this morning about the basics of human trafficking, and we'd like to welcome her up right now. Thank you, Joanne.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Thank you for all of those of you who got up so early on a Saturday morning to get here. I drove in from Canyon City. It was a beautiful morning on 115, and I saw all these other sleepy drivers. Then I saw all the cars coming in here and following to Burger Hall. It was very exciting. So I appreciate all of you coming. How many of you have attended human trafficking events before? Okay. How many of you have never heard about human trafficking? Awesome. Okay. I'm from New York City, and when I get nervous sometimes I start talking really fast. So if you have a question at some point at the end, just raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer it, or follow up with me later. This is a true saying. Can you all see it? I'm going to read it just in case. It says, "We need people to know this is going on. We need trained people in our congregations, federations, and agencies at all levels to identify signs of trafficking. Most of us were not aware that this was impacting our own communities, but the issue is serious and widespread. Human trafficking is not only happening to foreign nationals, it's happening to kids in our own communities." This is from Susan Stern, chair of the Jewish Federation of North America National Campaign in 2013. When I started working with youth in 1999, we would have youth come to our facilities and they would discuss that they had been involved in prostitution, and we pushed it as a side issue of all the other things that were going on in their life. And it was only probably the last 7 or 8 years that we realized that this was a bigger issue than we thought, because most of us thought this doesn't really happen in the United States. Isn't that true? It happens outside the United States. When I was stationed in Japan in long time ago, 1991, we would go to different restaurants and they had hostesses. And all the hostesses were from the Philippines. And so I started asking, why were all these hostesses from the Philippines? And my friends told me, because they were brought over for a better life. So they paid someone $5,000 to $10,000 in US dollars, and they had to work it off. And I was appalled. But I thought, this only happens overseas. It doesn't happen here in the United States. Here are some definitions of human trafficking defined. Sex trafficking is defined as a person used in a commercial sex act, which is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. Actually, the median age for people that, or for young women especially, that are brought into human trafficking is 12 years old. Can you imagine your 12-year-old daughter, granddaughter, niece, neighbor being recruited to perform sex acts? One of the first children that I came across that we knew that had been trafficked from Los Angeles to Las Vegas and came to Colorado for treatment was abducted before she was 12 years of age. She was expected to perform enough sex acts a day to bring in $1,000. She couldn't come back home, her pimp's home, until she had raised $1,000. She didn't get any days off. She had to earn $30,000 a month for that pimp. And when she ran away, she was scared. She was picked up by social services in Clark County, and she ran away quickly. They picked her up the next time they got her on the first plane out of there. But we were told that her pimp would probably look for her because she was such a high producer. Can it get any more disgusting than that? Labor trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjugation to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Came across a young man used as a mule since the age of 12. He was afraid they'd kill his family, and this was here in Colorado. It started in Colorado, and he had to take drugs all over. When he was picked up off the streets by the police, he was afraid to tell them because he thought his family would be killed. They put him in treatment, not understanding all that he did, and after being with us for a few months, then he finally came clean on all the things that they had him doing. And it was really difficult getting him over the fear of being killed, or his mother being killed, brothers and sisters being killed, and that we could have a safe place for him. A victim need not be physically transported from one location to another in order for the crime to fall within these definitions. I used to think it was literal when we talked about human trafficking, that they traffic from one state to another, and it's not. They could be trafficked from one street over. Some of the faces of modern slavery is sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, forced labor trafficking, bonded labor, debt bondage, organ trade. How many of you ever thought about the organ trade being involved in human trafficking? I didn't. Never thought of that being part of it. Involuntary domestic servitude. We've heard of a case here in Colorado, didn't we, the last few years in Aurora, where a woman was brought against her will to this country and was working as a domestic for this wealthy family. Forced child labor and unlawful recruitment and use of child soldiers, which we don't see here in the United States, but it's a huge, huge deal in Africa. Vulnerable populations to be trafficked, the LGBT community. How many of you ever met a transgender youth on the street? How many of you have ever seen them on the 16th Street Mall in Denver and just thought they're kind of weird? How many of you ever thought that their families may have just tossed them out because they decided to be transgender and they weren't going to deal with it? I've worked with youth that were told, "You're a boy. If you don't dress like a boy, I don't want anything to do with you." Always shocks me to wonder, where is the unconditional care and concern of parents and families when they toss them to the street? So they get involved in survival sex, because what else is there? How are they going to eat? Where are they going to sleep? And no one helps them. I was coming down the stairs to the 16th Street Mall last year, and I had just been talking about transgender youth. And there was I didn't realize at the time at the bottom of the stairs dropped a pack of cigarettes. I stopped and helped them pick it up. In their face when I stopped it, I said, "Here you go. Have a wonderful day." They were shocked. It just told me, how much kindness do they come across during the day? How many times do we walk past them and just ignore them, not pay any attention? I hope after today that you'll start paying attention to your environment, and when you're down in Denver, downtown Colorado Springs, even at the mall, that you start paying some attention. Illegal immigrants are very vulnerable to be trafficked, as are children and young adults. Indigenous persons. We don't talk enough about our Native American brothers and sisters here in the United States and at risk that their youth are. I've been very involved with American Indians for several years, and I've been on several reservations that have casinos. And I've asked the judges, how many children go missing when you have a big event? How many are at the casino? And I haven't had one yet tell me that it happens in their casino. And I know it is. I know they're disappearing. I've worked with these kids and they've told me what's gone on at the casinos. We really need to educate. There is no shame in saying this happened on the reservation. We want to help. We want to stop it. At-risk youth, persons with disabilities, and victims of domestic violence. There are children that run away from their homes because they're being victimized at home, thinking that it'll be better for them somewhere else, not realizing because their victimization at home, they become a target. When they're on Tejon, when they're on Nevada, how many of you go by is it the Big Chief Motel? At night, when I'm driving home to Canyon City to see these young ladies, and I wonder, sometimes I stop and watch, and go, where are they going? What's going on? Should I turn it in? Should I make a phone call? Should I call the hotline? Where trafficking occurs in the United States. It's in legal and illegal industries in the United States. Brothels, they're legal in Nevada in certain areas. That's legalized prostitution. They're being trafficked. No matter what their age is, and they're telling you, I'm doing this of my own free will, I have been yet to talk to someone that was in prostitution at any age that would tell you, I did it for my own free will. Escort services, massage parlors. Did we not have a big bust here a couple of days in Colorado Springs? Did you see me go, yes? Did you see my family go, yes, Colorado Springs Task Force? It's only been around for about a year, a little more, and we're finally cutting down on it here in Colorado Springs. Strip clubs. How many of you ever talked to a stripper? How many were there and they were only earning their tips, or they had to turn over a certain percentage of their tips? They weren't getting paid, but you all think, well, it's their decision. They're 18, 20, 21. How many are 14 and 15 and just made up to look like they're 20 or 21? When the police come in, all of a sudden they have no ID. Hotel services, sales crews. This one really got me when I learned about it. When I lived here in Colorado Springs, I lived on the east side, and I always had children coming to my door saying they went to a high school that they could never tell me what the name was, and it didn't dawn on me at the time because I wasn't working in the field. And they would ask me to buy magazines. I was working, the last time this happened to me, I was working with at-risk youth, but I had no clue. This young lady came to the door, and when I wouldn't buy a magazine, she broke down in tears. And she said, you just don't know what it's like. And I said, I know what it's like. I work with at-risk youth. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not buying any magazines. And she walked away just sobbing, and I saw her get into a van. I wish I had known, this was in the 90s, I wish I had known then what I know today about sales crews. If you see someone come to your door and they're having magazines and they need for sale, ask them if they're okay. Don't go after the van or the car that they get into, but please take down that license plate number and call it in. During this last year, someone who had been to the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado noticed one of these vans in Falcon and called it in. We don't know what happened, but please make that call. Please ask them if they need help, but don't put yourself in danger. Don't take them into your home thinking you can save them, but do everything you can. Get a description of the people in the van, how many, and of that person that's at your door. And then in agriculture. It also happens in manufacturing, janitorial services, construction, health and elder care, domestic service, and carnivals. Health and elder care also made the news in the last couple of years because nurses were being recruited from other countries, promised to come here into the United States to get very well-paying jobs as nurses. And they got here and found out that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. Carnivals. How many of you go to a carnival? How many of you go to the carnival that's off of Powers Boulevard behind Wendy's? I went for years and I thought, some of these people look a little strange. If you come down to Canyon City during festivals, you know, we have carnivals there. I can't go anymore. I'm always afraid of what am I going to see and who's going to be there and is there a child, and I just educate the police department and sheriff department in Fremont County going, are you on the outlook for youth? Have they been kidnapped? Are they working the carnival? Have they been forced to do that? The victims are frequently lured by false promises of a lucrative job, stability, education, or loving relationships. You know, children always want to be loved. Even if they have the worst parents ever, they always want to be loved. They want someone to care about them. They'll never tell you my parents are that bad and they beat me and it's horrible. They want a loving family. If they can't get that at home, they look for it in other places. How many of you know youth that have got involved with a bad guy? at school and go, oh, that's not good. Because they're desperate for someone to love them and they don't realize, maybe this isn't a good thing. Maybe this isn't a good person for me. In the United States, victims can be men or women, adults or children, foreign nationals or U.S. citizens. While they share the trait of vulnerability, victims have diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, varied levels of education, and may be documented or undocumented. This doesn't just happen to people who don't have money. There have been young ladies who come from well-to-do families who wanted to be models, wanted to work in the music industry, and were told, you know, I can help you with this. Come with me to Florida, come with me to Las Vegas, come with me to New York, I'll make your dreams come true. And they go, only to find out that that's not what the deal was either. We've heard stories of women that went for modeling and wound up in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and then didn't know how to get back home, or were told that their families would be killed if they did escape. As defined under U.S. law, victims of human trafficking can be divided into three populations: children under 18 induced into commercial sex, adults age 18 or over induced to commercial sex through force, fraud, or coercion, and children and adults induced to perform labor or services through force, fraud, or coercion. In Colorado, and I think Becky's here, Becky Atencio, she was here, I know, I saw her, because we always look at each other when we do this. In Colorado, if you're in child welfare prior to the age of 18, you can get services till age 21. But the statute says you're an adult after age 18. So part of the Human Trafficking Council that I'm working on is to make sure that we have some that we're able to come together on what the age is for children. If we can define children to the age of 21 for social services to get benefits, then I think the age of child to be consent should be the age of 21 and not dropped off. A lot of the children or adults that you talk to, even when they're 30, when did this start? I was 14. I was 15. I was 12. This started way before their 18th birthday. A lot of pimps, when the girls start turning 18, 19, and 20, they're kind of done with them. I think they're a little dried up. They're not as worth as much money as when they're younger. Victims face many challenges in accessing help. Their traffickers may confiscate their identification and money. They may not speak English. How many of you like the show Cops? I used to love the show Cops. I can't watch it anymore. But I used to love the show Cops, and I loved when they were in Las Vegas. And I always wondered when they'd go up to a girl and see him on the street at night and it's past curfew and they'd say they're 18, can I see your ID card? I left it at home. Do you have a driver's license? No, I don't have one. And they'd say, okay, well, you need to get off the street. Hello? There's a reason why they don't have a driver's license or ID on them. They're probably not over 18. Why are we not investigating further? Why are we not asking more questions? Yes, it may make your job a little bit harder, but get the girls off the street. They may not know where they are because they've been moved frequently. A lot of these girls are moved around to sporting events. Super Bowl? I cringe at Super Bowl. Love to watch the game and always wondering what's going on in the hotels. What's going on outside of them. Any big sporting events, you know all the pimps are going to bring their girls to that sporting event. NASCAR, football, baseball, wherever they know there's going to be a large percentage of men, they're hoping they want girls that are underage, and they'll bring them there. They're often not allowed to communicate with family or friends, and they may have trouble trusting others due to their traffickers' manipulation and control tactics. They're very charming, they're very good, they're very convincing. How many of us have been judgmental and said, they could just leave? What's holding them there? They can't leave. Maybe they're not in physical bondage, but they're in mental bondage. They have heart bondage. They think this is the only person that's really cared about me. This is the only person that's ever bought me clothes. This is the only person that's ever taken me to McDonald's. I always thought that was funny. You'd ask the girl, so where would they take you to dinner? They took me to dinner. They took me to McDonald's. I've never been to McDonald's. And how many of us take that for granted? They took you to McDonald's? You earned $1,000 that night for them and they took you to McDonald's? How much of that money did you get to keep? Ask the young ladies, because they think they loved me, they cared about me. I earned a lot of money. How much of that money did you get to keep? Well, none of it. Wasn't there a problem with that? You're earning money you're not keeping. Traffickers lure and ensnare people into forced labor and sex trafficking by manipulating and exploiting their vulnerabilities. Traffickers promise a high-paying job, loving relationship, or new exciting opportunities. And I realized I just read that, didn't I? Recognizing the signs. I didn't? I read it earlier and it looked familiar. Thanks. Traffickers promise high-paying jobs, loving relationships, or new and exciting opportunities. In other cases, they may kidnap victims or use physical control or violence to control them. A lot of times they get them hooked on drugs. That's the easiest way to get control over them. How many have heard, once you try meth, it only takes once? Only takes once on ecstasy, they'll get them hooked right away. So it's this horrible cycle of using drugs and prostituting, so you're prostituting, so you keep getting the drugs and you can't get out of it. Often the traffickers and their victims share the same national, ethnic, or cultural background, allowing the trafficker to better understand and exploit the vulnerabilities of their victims. Traffickers can be lone individuals or extensive criminal networks. Pimps, gangs, family members, labor brokers, employers of domestic servants, small business owners, and large factory owners have all been found guilty of human trafficking. Their common thread is a willingness to exploit other human beings for profits. We used to worry about gangs in the drug trade up the I-25 corridor. Drugs is not renewable. Once you sell it, it's gone. You have to replenish your supply. But how many times can they sell a girl at night? And the next day, and the next day. Recognizing the signs. In common work and living conditions, the individual in question is not free to leave or come and go as she wishes. Is under 18 and is providing commercial sex acts, is in the commercial sex industry and has a pimp / they call him manager, is unpaid, paid very little or paid only through tips, works excessively long or unusual hours, is not allowed breaks or suffers under unusual restrictions at work, owes a large debt and is unable to pay it off, was recruited through false promises concerning the nature and conditions of his or her work, and high security measures exist in the work and or living locations, such as opaque windows, boarded up windows, bars on windows, barbed wire, security cameras. In some neighborhoods that may seem normal, but if you live in a neighborhood that you see security cameras and bars on the window, and you're kind of like, is it normal? Maybe it is. Maybe they're just a little paranoid, but maybe you should keep an eye out for what's going on in that house. Boarded up windows, it's not normal to see people coming in and out, right? You might see transients or think, well, they're breaking in for a place to sleep, but if you see young girls and young children coming in and out, please report it. Poor mental health or abnormal behavior, is fearful, anxious, depressed, submissive, tense, or nervous and paranoid, exhibits unusually fearful or anxious behavior after bringing up law enforcement, avoids eye contact. When children are prostituting, there's certain signs that you can see. On the 16th Street Mall, I was down there one day and there was a girl very pregnant having an argument with what looked like a drug dealer. All of a sudden she got off the sidewalk and went around another way and then got back on the sidewalk because they're not allowed to walk on the same side of the street as their pimp. So I knew that was their pimp. That was her pimp there. And she was pregnant out on the street. If she were to make eye contact with another male, that means she sold, that she gave herself to that other pimp. That's why they don't make eye contact. They're not allowed to look. Poor physical health, they lack health care, may appear malnourished, show signs of physical and or sexual abuse, physical restraint, confinement, or torture, and that can also happen to people who are labor trafficked. Lack of control, has few or no personal possessions, is not in control of his or her own money, no financial records, no bank account, is not in control of her or his own ID or passport, is not allowed or able to speak for themselves. A third party may insist on being present or translating. claims of just visiting and inability to clarify where he or she is staying or an address. There's lots of youth I've interviewed who go, where are you staying? Oh, with my aunt in Colorado Springs. Well, I think I live in Canyon. I don't know Colorado Springs because it's so far away. But where? Well, I don't remember that address. Was it downtown, on the north side? Was it by a mall? I don't remember. Huh. Somewhere. Yeah, I just stayed with them. Red flag. Lack of knowledge of whereabouts or do not know what city he or she is in. Loss of sense of time. Has numerous inconsistencies in their story. And this list obviously is not exhaustive and represents only a selection of possible indicators. Also, the red flags in this list may not be present in all trafficking cases and not cumulative. So I put a website on here, so if you want to learn more about it, please go to www.traffickingresources.org. Modern day slavery. It's a 365-day-a-year crime that requires a 365-day-a-year response. It doesn't take a holiday. Traffickers don't stop for national or religious holidays. How can you help? Even if it's vigilance. It's too early in the morning for me to speak like this. Vigilance. That will help. Training. Being here today is a huge help. And sharing with others what you know. My husband works in retail. Some of those poor people, he comes home tells me how many people he told about human trafficking that day, or how concerned he was, or someone going on Craigslist and she came in to buy something to take because she had to go sell this piece of furniture in somewhere in Pueblo, and I think he scared her to death, but she didn't go. She said, my husband said he wanted to watch the football game, so he wasn't going to go with me. I think she went home and got him. Think of other ways you can help by attending the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado, to come to the Human Trafficking Council up in Denver. We're open meetings that you can come to. If you have any questions or you want emails on it, let us know. Get on the email list for the Human Trafficking Task Force Southern Colorado. I'd like to acknowledge trafficking and